Tonight's event is to explore what sustainable actions we can take during COVID-19 to celebrate the great work already being done in the Edinburgh community and hopefully empower you to get involved in new opportunities and promote increased action towards fighting against climate change. So before we hear from our wonderful range of speakers, there are just a few housekeeping things to note. So firstly, it would be great if you could please keep your mic muted unless you're invited to speak. We will give the chance for the panel to talk first before taking any questions or comments from the audience. We do have some question time put into the schedule. So if you could wait to type in the chat or turn your mic on until then, that would be great. And also, if you do wish to speak during the question time, you can also use the raise hand function, which is at the top of the Teams. They recently updated it. It's where that little smiley face and hand is. And if you just raise your hand there, you will be called on and you can speak and ask your question to the panelist. This event will be recorded, so if you do not wish to be recorded, please send a private message to Stuart Lamont, who works at the Students Association, who will pause the recording if and when you speak. And if you need captions to participate, you can switch them on by clicking on the three little dots at the top of your screen and then pressing the CC button. Perfect. And also please do remember, like all Student Association events, this is operated under a safe space policy. So if you have any concerns about comments made or the safety, you can also message Stuart as well. And firstly, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what you can expect from the panel this evening. So first, we're going to have a welcome and introduction from Rachel, and then a talk from Professor Peter Higgins before we go to Katrine, a student, Ross from the Food Security and Sustainability Society, Ellie, another student, Alia from the Makeup and Ethics Society, and Lauren from the SRS department, who are all going to share some stuff around sustainability and have a great diverse range of presentations to present to you tonight. And then after that, we will be having a Q&A. So that is the rough agenda for the evening. And now I'm very excited to pass it along to my fellow sabbatical officer, Rachel, who is going to give a quick introduction to our campaign.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the launch of our campaign. We're really excited to finally get to the launch stage of the campaign, and I'm really grateful for you all turning up. I think we've got a lot more people than I expected, so that's really great to see. So I'll start a bit by explaining why Amanda and I wanted to run this campaign and what we hope to achieve with it. So the primary aim of this campaign is to ensure that the climate emergency remains on the agenda of our student body during this new global crisis, and to empower and support our students with the information and resources they need to make the changes that they want to see. With so much else happening in the world at the moment, we wanted to make sure that the climate emergency didn't fall by the wayside. Within the Students Association and the university, we wanted to do our best to make sure that even though budgets are tighter, people are busier, and everything at the moment is very reactionary, we're helping to foster a culture that prioritises the planet and is willing to put time, effort and resource into this issue, even though it won't be a quick fix. We wanted to explore the relationship between the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate emergency and recognise the direct impact the pandemic has had on our environment. Whether this be how it's demanded a heightened use of single-use items such as PPE that now pollute our oceans and wildlife, how it's seen a reduction in airplanes and travel and CO2 emissions from industry, or how it's highlighted pre-existing social and environmental inequalities. Crucially, it's important we recognise how the pandemic has impacted our relationship with and our understanding of our environment and its fragility, as well as our understanding of social responsibility and our individual impact. Since we're all still stuck at home, I think it's really easy to feel powerless and overwhelmed by the world, and I know I certainly do at times. So our aim is to highlight the little things that we can all do that really do have an impact and really are the foundation of the culture that I mentioned earlier, so that we eventually get to a place where we don't have to consciously think, I'm going to be sustainable here, or ask ourselves what's better for the planet here. But these choices and decisions are ingrained into us as people and as a society to a point where they're instinctive and subconscious. We also wanted to help tackle the feeling of isolation that this period has brought for many of us. By highlighting individuals and groups working on these issues right now, we wanted to show our students who are sat alone in their bedrooms that there are other people just like them, right on their virtual doorstep, that are working on the issues that they care about and who want them to get involved. Now, aside from all those lofty ideals, this is primarily a social media campaign, as everything has to be at the moment. We focused on 5 key areas across 5 days where students can make a difference in their daily lives and do their part to protect the environment during the pandemic. These themes are food, zero waste, shopping locally and sustainably, energy and water consumption, and education and resources. We'll share tips and tricks on how our students can ensure they are making sustainable choices in these areas in the context of COVID-19, and spotlight individual students and student groups who've been working on tackling such issues. So keep an eye out on our channels for this content throughout the week. We're fortunate enough to be joined tonight by some of these students and student groups, as well as a few other members of our University and City of Edinburgh community, who are going to tell us a bit about how the pandemic has impacted them and their work, what they've been doing to stay green during COVID-19, and how you can get involved. So, without any further ado, let's hand over to our first speaker, Professor Pete Higgins, who's going to introduce this topic far better than I just did, and give some of his insights into the impact of the pandemic on the climate emergency and the world.
Thank you both, Amanda and Rachel. Can you hear me? Just let me know that to start with.
Yes, all good.
Great, thank you. Okay, so when we met, the three of us, to discuss this, I was given a brief, and having been given the brief, I concluded that I really didn't need to speak at all, and that's been evident in Rachel's comments just now, where she's given a very eloquent coverage of many of the big issues that we're all facing today. But nonetheless, I'm going to give it a go and see if I can contribute to this at all. I think the main thing I want to say is, in terms of a preamble, is that I suppose I'm thinking of this as a bigger scale issue than what we just do individually. And so that will come over as well as some of the individual choices. So if I can have the first slide, please. Okay, so I came across this image, and it is, of course, evocative of many of the things that we are facing at the moment. But you'll note straight away that I've maintained the title that I'm expected to work to, but I've also made a point of including biodiversity alongside climate as a major issue, and that will come through in a moment. Next slide, please. So I wish I'd been able to meet this guy, the French artist Villemard. And you'll see here that in 1910, he produced a series of postcards called Utopia, Predictions for the Year 2000. Now, I've been using this slide for some time to say, oh, well, we're all going to be learning online at some point in the future, and we won't need books anymore, and we won't need to go to the library anymore. And of course, what's happened is that this has been forced upon us with great urgency because of COVID. So you've all been, like I have, I'm sure, learning in isolation. This is not a happy place to be. I can cope with it for a bit, and I'm sure you can, but it's not what we signed up for, and it misses many dimensions. Next slide, please. Now, whilst this has all been going on, and we've been learning online, and we haven't been able to meet, to socialize and so on, there have been a number of big things still carrying on out there. So COVID is one big wave, but that is leading to economic recession, which we hear about globally. And behind that, the next big wave, of course, climate change. And these are issues that actually in the long run will dwarf COVID. But we'll have to see how we respond to COVID. Perhaps it might give us some indications as to how we might deal with these other big issues. If you give me the next slide, please. You'll see that I'm not the only one who's thinking this way. This is the image here is of an article I wrote for Scottish teachers recently for their magazine, which was based upon the argument that coronavirus is just a fire drill. All right, lots and lots of people are having a miserable time and people are dying as a result. But I'm not the only one who's arguing this. As you'll see here, the UN Secretary General and the Executive Director of the UN Sustainable Business Organization both think that this is just a temporary issue in a way, but will lead us to think carefully about how we respond to these other big issues in the months and years to come. Next slide, please. Oh, well, one would be nice. That's great. So, so what do coronavirus, economic recession, climate emergency, and the biodiversity crisis have in common? Well, they are known as wicked problems. Now, I came across this term a few years ago, and I really like the idea of wicked issues because they're difficult or impossible to solve. And you'll see the text there, they're contradictory, changing requirements, etc. And because of these complexities, they're very difficult to solve. One of the other definitions of wicked problems that I particularly like is that you have to be pretty smart to realize that you don't understand them. And that humility, I think, is quite important when we think about the issues that we're trying to deal with just now. Next slide, please. Now, a thing I often say to policymakers when I get the chance is that sustainability issues are really down to people issues, that we may know all sorts of technical dimensions to some of the big issues out there, but actually in the end it's people who make good decisions or bad decisions. Now, some of those people are you and I, and some of them are maybe the Where's Wally's of this image. If you give me the next image, please, you'll see what I mean. So they're here. Here are a few Where's Wally's. Now, you know, I don't know what your view of your own Prime Minister is, wherever she or he might be, but this is our one here in the UK. And one thing that is patently obvious is that the UK government has not responded well to the coronavirus pandemic. So we have to live in hope that they will actually make good decisions with regard to sustainability, climate change, the COP coming up next November here in Scotland. Now, they're just one, policymakers are just one player in the game in terms of giving information and making decisions. We all know that big oil is very influential and continues to lobby to continue its businesses. And alongside that, there are a couple of individuals down here, one of whom you undoubtedly will recognize, the arch information manipulator and stealer of people's profiles to make money out of them, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and those like him. And then the other person you may not recognize over here, Rupert Murdoch, who is the biggest media mogul in the world. Now, these people are the ones who provide information for us. Now, we have choices. We can decide whether or not to follow the information they give, or we can question it. If you give me the next slide, please. We can trust them or we can trust others here. Now, you may choose to trust a small girl who sat down outside of Parliament in August 2018 at the age of 15 and said, there's a crisis out there and we need to respond. You may choose to trust the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the world's most senior scientists in this area, and the reports that they produce. You may choose to listen to who I can't help but refer to as Saint David Attenborough, because he's absolutely my hero. And when David says there's stuff happening, well, we better take seriously. You might choose to pay for your information from one online source or another. If you're getting your information for free, there's a pretty good chance that that somebody's making money out of you somewhere along the line. So I subscribe to The Guardian, which I find it's got good coverage, but you know, it's up to you who you subscribe to. Or you might choose to go to a data site like Our World in Data. I must give you a plug for this here. I think it's the most reliable source of data on all sorts of things. And the young woman in the picture is Hannah Ritchie, who's a doctoral graduate of mine and Dave Ray in geosciences. Quite the most brilliant young woman I've ever worked with, and she now works for the University of Oxford on Our World in Data. And whatever information you might want, you can find it there. So these are, to me, are my trusted sources. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things about information is that we have to be prepared to say it's not right. We have to question it. And so one of the mantras that I try to live by is that being wrong is okay. That as long as we accept that we're wrong, then we can be right the next time round. And so Thomas Huxley here, known as Darwin's bulldog, allegedly said this, you know, being wrong is only just second best to being right. We learn that way. And that's one of the reasons that education is particularly valuable, because it teaches us that we can't always be right. Next slide, please. So we're often told to be very careful about all the decisions that we make. And I'm sure if you're signed up for this Green During COVID event, you're amongst those thoughtful people, and you've probably done an environmental footprint. I teach a course called Sustainability and Social Responsibility. Some of you may be on it, some of you may have taken it. And the assignment that students are doing at the moment is working out their environmental footprint and trying to reduce it by 20%. Now, we can all do that, and the information that you can find is based on proper scientific information in the first place. So that's helpful. Next slide, please. But we often think about our footprint, in other words, the impact we're having, which is thought of as being quite negative, but we find it a little bit harder to talk about what we can do that's positive. So in other words, our green handprint. And I'd like to talk a little about some things we might all do in that regard. Next, please. So here are a few. The first of these, and I would say this, wouldn't I, is keep studying. You're all learning at this university, this great university. You're developing skills, you're training for futures and careers, and we have no knowledge of what our careers will look like in the future. You're young people, your futures are ahead of you, and you need to be prepared to study, to embrace learning as a lifelong commitment, because whatever job you expect to get when you leave this university, there's a very high likelihood that if you work to the age of 80, which you probably will, you'll be doing something that no one's even thought of yet. So keep studying, but keep loving learning. The next really is making sure you're well informed. It relates back to that issue of where do you get your information from? Always questioning, always quizzing. Where does that information come from? Who is giving you that information? Why are they giving you that information? It's a restlessness that you can't escape. I can never really trust any source of information, and the people I trust most would want me to question their sources, their information as sources. Making sustainability choices, well, that's what much of this event's about. So I won't say much about this, but just to say that too is an act of being, I suppose, an act of being mindful all the time, thinking, is this the right decision? Is that a better decision? Without beating yourself about the head with whether or not you're always making the right decision, but just trying to be mindful. Next one is looking after yourself, others, and nature. Looking after yourself, your health and well-being is crucial, because you can't contribute unless you are well. And that means you have to be mentally well, you have to be mentally strong. And that partly comes from working with others and feeling that you're doing something that's important and valuable. Now, I've said and nature there. And nature, well, I would say that, perhaps wouldn't I, because this is part of my work, but it is quite plain that nature sustains us. Nature is one of the ways in which we will actually address the climate crisis, and you will probably be aware of nature-based climate solutions being one way forward. The university, I was in a meeting this afternoon about that very issue with regard to the university's approach to it. So there are many, many more things I would say about biodiversity and the crises that are befalling biodiversity at the moment, but you actually feel better. We've done plenty of research, as have others, on the fact that you'll feel better if you spend time in nature. And what's more, I can show you information that you learn better if you're in green spaces some of the time. The final thing here is being political and lobbying and protesting. Well, I probably don't need to say too much about that, but I will say just one thing, that I've been actively involved in working with policymakers for a long time. And one of the things that's become clear to me is if they get 40 different letters from 40 different individuals that are about a particular issue, they think it's a big issue, not form letters. So if you're interested, write. Now, remember, two big things are happening this year in Scotland. One of them is the national elections coming up in May. Use your vote if you have one, but lobby. Just try to get things into the minds of politicians. and also, of course, with regard to the COP, and just keep that going. The same applies to the university. Just don't ever, ever stop. I'll come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please. Now, this can be summarized for me. I like these kind of models in this form. So it's really important that you connect to place, to people, and to the planet. Just think about, how do I connect? Think about the consequences of your actions. Think about yourself as a citizen not just of the university, but of the planet. And then think about care. So how do I present myself? How am I as a caring person, and what do I care about? Now, right in the middle of all this is that notion of critical thinking. Everything I'm saying to you now, I want you to dissect, examine, question, and convince yourself that I've got something to say or I haven't. That is the core skill amongst all of these things that you must be able to take with you throughout the rest of your life. Next slide, please. Now, the university is a great institution. I am proud to work in this university. It's the best job I've ever had. And I've worked here 5 times longer than in any job I've ever had in my life. I love my colleagues. I love working with the students. And actually, I love working with senior managers. We have got a good senior team in this university. But I have made a joke on several occasions of being, a thorn in the side of the university, and I make a point of being so. I was at an event with the principal just before we locked down, and I walked up to him and said, "The zombies are back. We've been resting over the Christmas break, but we will never stop from nagging you about these big issues. Please do so. Staff have got power, but students much more so." Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to say much about the university other than it has a very strong strategy towards 2030. Its 0 by 2040 climate strategy is world leading if we can implement it. And there are things that we need to do so. The SRS department, you'll hear more about it later, is unique in the UK as far as I'm concerned. It's a very strong, powerful organisation within the university that's very well respected and very well led by Dave Gorman and Michelle Brown. And they listen. So the Be Sustainable thing that I'm showing here is a thing that I proposed that we should develop as a training system for academic staff and professional staff, so that they can be sustainable as well in their practices. So there's a lot going on in this university. Much more needs to be done. And in particular, meeting the 0 by 2040 climate strategy is what I'd like to return to in my next slide, please. Right, so the Student Association of this university has been very powerful in influencing the university. Going back to 2018, 2019, a lot of stuff was going on. This is a video on the bottom left done by master students that I work with in our school, who were protesting along with others with regard to the climate emergency, getting a commitment from the university. The university is not backsliding, but it is not prioritizing these issues quite in the way in which it might, because, of course, coronavirus, going back to that issue. The university is having some financial difficulties, but these issues are of paramount importance. So use your voice, please use your voice, and enlist staff to help you. Next slide, please. A few final evocative comments, if I may. We have a different president in America than we had a couple of months back, and here's one before that. And I remember him being asked, what does he and what does Michelle advise their daughters? And he said, well, we don't really think it's our position to advise or encourage our daughters to do anything in particular, but we do say this: be useful and be kind. Well, to my mind, as a way of living, you could do an awful lot worse than that. Next slide, please. Now, I'm in education. I'm in education for the long run. I don't just work in a university, which is about education, but I work in education policy. I teach teachers and others as well who are interested in professional roles in the diverse areas of sustainability, environment, and the outdoors. And I really believe this to be an important function of education. We need to be prepared to refound our civilization. This isn't global collapse, though it might be, but it's reimagining, re-envisioning, doing the things that we know that we'll need to do to constantly reinvent ourselves as we go forward. And certainly you will in your lifetimes. Next slide, please. And Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist and thinker, said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Well, you are amongst those groups, not just one, of thoughtful, committed citizens. And I hope what I'm doing here is sowing the seed, planting the acorn, to make you appreciate that you can do this if you hadn't realized it already. Next slide, please. And I like this image, and I'm going to finish with this and one other, partly because I find it reassuring. We have a beautiful planet. They're hard to find, beautiful planets. And actually, for me, I have my go-to places, my dream palaces, if you like, and they involve green spaces. They involve people in those spaces. They involve wildlife and biodiversity. And it makes me feel that there is something that is really important to argue for. I will never stop. I will keep going, and I'm sure you will too. Final slide, please. So there's not quite the final slide. Ban Ki-moon said this many years ago. When I heard it, I thought, fantastic, I'm going to use that. And of course, never everybody uses it now. But actually, a lander landed on Mars just recently, and this week. What a wonderful, wonderful technological achievement that is. But as far as I know, nobody's discovered a planet where you can grow neeps and tatties. We may explore these planets, but we're thinking of exploring them to exploit them. What we really need to do is look after the one we've got and live in a respectful relationship with the biodiversity of this planet and all its peoples. Good luck with the rest of your lives if I don't get to talk to you again at the end. Thank you for the opportunity to speak just now.
Thank you very much, Pete, for your insights, and it was really great to hear how this, how the brief kind of inspired you to write this presentation. It was really great to hear from you. So now we'll move on to our next speaker, which is, if we could just jump onto the next slide. There we go. Katrine Julstad, who's an MSc Literature and Modernity student and is also a writer and editor of Eudaimonia Records. So over to you, Katrine.
Thank you very much. So as already said, I'm Katrine Julstad. I'm a postgraduate student in the School of LLC, and I'm currently a program representative of the MSc Literature and Modernity program. And I'd like to thank Rachel and Amanda for inviting me here to talk about Eudaimonia Records today. Next slide, please. So Eudaimonia Records is a cross-uni, student-run online platform that publishes poetry. The initial concept was a blog called The Quarantine Journal, which I started with some friends in March 2020 in response to COVID-19 lockdown, quarantines, and isolation. So pre-COVID, we used to, meet weekly to eat biscuits, drink tea, and talk about creative writing. So when we weren't able to do that anymore, we moved online and decided to share some of our experiences in prose and poetry form. Then in August 2020, the core of our group, so myself, my co-editor Millie Bish at King's College London and the Globe Theatre, and our social media manager Jessica Heron at the University of York, rebranded to Eudaimonia Records. So this formalized the project, and we invited other people, other poets, to write with us. So focus is still on contemporary issues, and we've been going steadily, publishing 3 poems a week. Next slide, please. So some examples of recent political expressions include Millie Bish's poem 060121, which was a response to the storming of the United States Capitol, and my own poem, A Word of Reason, which reacted against this overwhelming nature of media that we've been experiencing. So a significant part of what I've written for Eudaimonia Records has been environmental in nature. I think this is partly because of my participation in Professor David Ferrier's classes in the School of LLC last semester, though I've personally been interested in trees and woodlands from an environmental and literary perspective since undergrad. In Professor Ferrier's classes, we analyzed environmental poetry, or eco-poetry as it's also called, and some of the themes did seep into my own work. So next slide, please. So across a week in early December, I wrote the 3 poems Deep Time, Handstand, and Chestnuts, which each responded to an environmental text or topic that I come across during my studies. More recently, I wrote the poems Melting, We Meant for There to Be More, Slow Changes Disappear, and A Broken Cycle, which mostly continue this environmental theme, though from a more abstract point of view. In that sense, I think Melting was a step back into the intertextual dialogue of December, since I wrote it while halfway through reading chapter 4 in Professor Ferrier's Footprints in Search of Future Fossils. Very good environmental book, but that's not what I'm talking about. So what we came to realize at Eudaimonia Records is literature's role today as an educator and a source of inspiration to make changes. So environmental poetry uses the space of the page to imagine what the world has been like, is like, and will be, and this is vital for the environmental movement. By reaching out to readers and inspiring them with poetry, with literature, we can inspire short and long-term environmental changes. And we're still, our platform is still looking for aspiring poets and engaged readers to join our growing community online. So as sort of final note to fill this little space that I have, or as also an example of what we do, I'd like to read the poem Melting to you, which is the next slide. Though first I want to say thank you for listening and for being here today, and thank you to Rachel, Amanda, and the Student Union. Okay. Melting. Blue ice is cold ice, is layers of crystallized layers merged into rolling plasticity that grinds the rock and digs until it thaws 10, 15, 20 years, then leaving clay deposits and river deltas and dales between polished mountain peaks. And darling, your fever runs too high these days. It threatens to short circuit this blue immune system. And we will have to find a different way to life, if life is what we want and you want, and we cling to this hope that we will adapt and bring you back to health. But one day we will tell our children's children about the blue ice and its compressed history, and will be a tale of fiction, barely preserved in the stories of the old and decrepit, as we lament and wish we did things differently and beg them not to blame us for something we could have tried to change. Thank you for listening. The contact details for our platform are on the final slide.
Thank you so much, Katrine, for sharing that with us. That poem was beautiful, and I think your presentation just now illustrated how there are a multitude of ways that you can express an interest in the environment and your passion for that. And this is just one of the many ways that one of our students has tried to do that. And I'd encourage anyone who's interested in getting involved at Eudaimonia Records to reach out to Katrine and to do so. So thank you for that. And we'll now move on to our next speaker, which is Roz from Food Security and Sustainability Society.
Oh, hello, I'm Roz, and as Rachel said, I'm the Social Secretary for Food Security and Sustainability Society. I just want to say thank you very much for the invitation, and yeah, let's get started. Next slide, please. So our focus this year as a society is to continue the conversation as this campaign follows as well. So we've been hosting quite a few online virtual panel discussions where we have some speakers that present to us, and then they then we open the floor to the audience to then give some questions. So we have two which are recorded, available to watch on our YouTube channel. So we have Will Veganism Save Us? Pretty self-explanatory, pretty big debate. And then we have Extinction 2050, which is on the sixth mass extinction, sorry, that's hard to say, and possible solutions surrounding that. That was very good. I enjoyed that one. Next slide, please. So throughout our social medias and the way we run, we do focus on promoting conscious food choices. So that can be anything from reducing your meat intake to sustainably sourcing food. So by using seasonal ingredients, supporting local, and also supporting organic and or regenerative farm practices, as well as reducing your food waste. So using your leftovers, get creative with your cooking, have fun with it. Yeah, next slide, please. So we have some future projects coming up. This is quite a big one. It's called the Planetary Health Meal Plan. That is in collaboration with some students from the University of Dundee. It's due to launch in September 2021, but it's proposing a flexible 1-month meal plan for students. That is both healthy, sustainable, and also accessible. So we're working with local businesses, nutritionists and academics to do this. There will be a formal event in March just to introduce this properly to everyone. Next slide, please. So the plot, obviously we had planned to use it this year, but due to regulations we weren't able to, but the plan is to build a community of growers and just learn to grow together, because we're all beginners to this, and just have fun. And then any successful veg and plants that we do grow, we will then cook together and use for potlucks and things. And yeah, anyone can get involved. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have some things that are on at the moment. So we've got a sustainable Masterchef competition with a chance to win some handcrafted goodies. So we've got a candle and some stickers from local Edinburgh small businesses. All you have to do, anyone can get involved, is just send a photo of your dish and explain what makes it sustainable. So it could be using up leftovers, using seasonal veg, whatever. We're open to anything. And then we do have some events coming up. So we've got a documentary screening and a virtual pub quiz with some more prizes to be won. Those dates are to be confirmed. And then the final slide just tells you how you can get involved. So membership for this semester is free. And yeah, if you have any questions, then don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ros, for that. Just one of several societies and student groups that we have at the association who focus on sustainability and social responsibility and all things of that area. And as you can see, they've been doing some really fantastic work this year, despite the challenges that they've faced. So I'd really encourage any student to get involved in that. Now we'll jump over to our next presenter, which is Ellie Sutton, who's an ecological and environmental science student. Over to you, Ellie.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm Ellie. I'm going to be just discussing the importance of environmental education and outreach during the pandemic. And Pete's already kind of touched on a bit of that. I'm going to give more of a kind of side from like a student's point of perspective as well. So my areas of interest kind of include wildlife conservation, sustainability, and environmental education. So if I could have the next slide, please. So yeah, as I said, just going to be talking about my work that I've done with various courses and also with educational resources. Could I have the next slide? Thank you. So yeah, during the pandemic, I think it's left a lot of us feeling a little helpless, and trying to tackle the climate crisis can seem very daunting, especially when we're sat at home watching the news, seeing the headlines about the Australian bushfires, or even more recently, the freezing temperatures in Texas that are threatening thousands of turtles. So I, for one, definitely felt like a little bit of a loose end during the first lockdown, as I'm normally quite proactive and always on the lookout for volunteering opportunities and also experiences. And I feel like just as we wanted to kind of make progress with sustainability when the pandemic hit, as it was discussed before, there's been an increased use of single-use plastics from PPE during the pandemic as well. So these are all things that are a little bit frustrating when we're trying to push forward actions in tackling the climate crisis. Could I have the next slide, please? So although it's not ideal, from the pandemic, we've also all had to kind of adapt to online learning and communication, which actually does have some benefits to it, I think. So I started looking into online environmental internships where I could make an impact, even if it was just from my desk at home. And I realised that there's a lot of online resources that are very easy to distribute as well and can be accessed by many people. So I think it's really, really useful to have them available to everyone. I think it's also a great chance to gain some technology skills, which can be useful when trying to seek jobs or just in general. I've recently signed up for virtual campaign workshops as well to help raise awareness of the climate crisis, and I've been attending online talks as well to gain a little bit more of an insight into current environmental issues. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the educational resources that I've been working on and also the courses that I've taken. So last summer, I completed a virtual internship where I developed environmental education resources for primary school children in Fiji. The projects aim to raise awareness of climate change, the Sustainable Development Goals and local wildlife conservation as well. And it involved presentations, activities, proposed field trips to a coral garden and also a mangrove plantation as well. And I also had planned to organise a school climate strike as well within the primary school children. So whilst creating the resources, I kind of realised how important it is to respect different cultures and work with communities in Fiji to help them develop sustainable solutions and improve environmental education. So also this semester, as part of a course, I'm developing online resources for children at the nursery up at King's Buildings. Whoever studies there is probably fairly familiar with it. The aim is to basically teach children about local biodiversity around Blackford Hill and how important it is to protect wildlife as well. So during the activities that I've kind of planned, they will learn about different plants and animals, habitats, the changing seasons, and also hibernation. I'm also trying to incorporate mindfulness into some of the resources to help establish a human-nature connection with the children as well. So yeah, with both of these projects, I wanted to encourage environmental responsibility and stewardship within children from a young age that I think is really important. And they also provided an opportunity to apply the passion and skills that I have to real life projects, which was great. So next slide, please. So yeah, I've just kind of got a few tips for other students to help them kind of be proactive and maybe take action just now during the pandemic. So I think there's lots of different ways that we can be sustainable. So for example, we could get involved with societies. So we can educate yourself by watching talks or debates or attending events like this. I think is really great. Could also look out for virtual internships and volunteering opportunities by simply searching online. Although I would say you need to, when you're doing this, you need to definitely look deep into the role description of the kind of opportunities first, and also the values and ethics of the different organisations before you definitely secure one and decide to go with that. So if you're creative as well, you could produce sustainable items or products. For example, I have plans to make sustainable candles using jars and drink cans as well, and my flatmates created upcycled lamps using old gym bottles and second-hand lampshades. So again, just getting creative, trying to do something different, and also keeps you busy, keeps you occupied during the pandemic if you're bored. Also, I'd really suggest supporting local and sustainable businesses and spreading the word and raising awareness of current environmental issues, either by social media or word of mouth as well. And I think Pete had touched on this before, but if there's a topic that you're particularly passionate about, I think emailing your local MP is a great way to try and push change as well. So if your degree is also quite flexible, you could take climate conservation or sustainability related courses. And if anyone would like any information or some advice in some of the courses that I've taken or can recommend, feel free to contact me. My contact information is on the next slide. And then finally, just kind of wanted to emphasize that anyone can be an activist and make help make positive change and positive impacts during the pandemic and also long after that. I think it's so important to kind of realize that you don't need to have a background or related degree in environmental or sustainable kind of topics. I think we need lots of people from across the whole board of degrees and interests and skills to help make global change as well. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, and here are my contact details if you want to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for that plethora of really sound advice and great tips. And obviously, if you have any questions, want to know more about courses or volunteering opportunities or internships that Ellie's kind of experienced, then please reach out to her. Okay, so now we will hop over to our next speaker, which is Alia from Makeup and Special Effects Society.
Okay, hi everybody. You can go on to the next slide, I think is my first slide. All right, sorry, no, then go back. Okay, so my name is Ali Alamari. I am the External Events Coordinator for Makeup and SFX Society, and I wanted to contribute to this event as a representative of a SOC whose main initiative doesn't actually directly have to do with sustainability and the environment, but also to talk about how this affects such a wide range of areas, and so I hope to shed a bit of a unique perspective to contribute to the event. Thank you to Rachel and Amanda for extending the invitation, and yeah, I can go on to the next slide. So I'll give a brief introduction to our society. We were established in 2016, so still a pretty new society. And we do weekly alternating workshops and socials. Those workshops can be tutorials, master classes. They're usually pretty educational, informative around makeup and special effects. We're a pretty small society, so we have in a given year anywhere between 25 to 40 members. Obviously, this fluctuates a lot during regular years and years that there's a pandemic going on. But yeah, so we're still pretty small, but very dedicated little membership base. Fundraising is a really big part of our society as well. This month, every event that we've held every week has been to raise money for Stonewall, the UK's leading LGBT charity. And then also during the winter break, we fundraised for Health in Mind by doing a little walkathon. We also do a lot of brand collaborations and master classes that are usually in store, but this year we've had to obviously pivot online. And so that's a collaboration with brands to do tutorials with their products or, more informative, say like skincare content we did last semester with The Ordinary. All right, next slide. So we incorporate sustainability to our society in a twofold kind of way. We have sustainability focused events. For example, our big one is our annual Sustainable Beauty event. It covers a huge breadth of spaces within the beauty industry, skincare, makeup, hair, soaps. So we hold this every year, and that sort of focuses on things like packaging and locally sourcing your tools in your makeup kit. We also have regular vegan and cruelty-free makeup workshops where we'll be exclusively using vegan and cruelty-free products. And then whenever vegan and cruelty-free products pop up in other events, we always make a point to point those out. But also in our society ethos, so makeup and special effects, it's a practice where, you need a kit. And so to have the appropriate tools is pretty essential. And so where we source our materials for our own kit, but also what we recommend to other people is really important to us. So we're pretty selective about where we recommend people to pick up their makeup from or their beauty supplies. Generally, we just discourage our members from using Amazon to source their kits. And also all of the brands we've worked with in direct collaboration. So all of our master classes have been with cruelty-free brands. And then all of the ones we've done this year are vegan and cruelty-free. So that's how we try to incorporate sustainability, usually in our society. Next slide, please. Okay, this approach has obviously changed a lot during COVID. And every one of us, whether it's been within the uni, within societies or not, we've had to make a lot of difficult decisions in choosing how we want to deal and how we want to adapt our practices to the pandemic. And so I really want to take this opportunity to hold ourselves accountable so that we can open up this conversation for other people to hold themselves, accountable and maybe have thoughts about how they've adapted during the pandemic. Because of the nature of our society and the practice of putting on makeup and special effects, the nature of the whole practice is really tactile, and we always have to maintain a careful balance between making environmentally conscious decisions, reducing our amount of disposables, try to recommend reusable products, and also best hygiene practices. So that obviously limits us a lot. We do have to use, for hygiene and accessibility reasons, a lot of single-use plastics. Also, in order to maintain our society kit and keep things hygienic, we have to replace our tools and materials pretty often. But as our events have been online, we've thankfully been able to sort of pivot away from that and try to make some more green and more sustainable choices in how we run our society. So firstly, the next point there is that we encourage all of our members. We encourage all of our members to use the materials that they have at home. Usually week by week, it'll be things like sponges or your own makeup or your own tools, your own brushes that you can use at home, so we don't have to send anything out. But for SFX events, and particularly DIYs, this can be pretty difficult. So that our other alternative is that we have been able to make up kits for our workshops ourselves that are available for collection. Firstly, we're able then, by making these kits ourselves, to source the materials in the kits locally if we want to, but also it's limiting the members' reliance on using delivery services with really fast delivery, really fast turnaround, where perhaps business practices are not super ethical or not super green. And we also don't have to rely on putting our workshop kits through the post and don't have to contribute to that sort of green expense. But overall, in any decision that we've tried to make during the pandemic, our main goal is just to do our best to set a good example. Even though we're a small society, we've been given this platform by USA, and we always want to do what we can. And so when we put our best and try and make small and effective changes, if we've influenced or encouraged one student to reevaluate how they're approaching makeup and make sustainability not even like a second thought, then that's a huge plus for us. And we're really happy with that if we've influenced just one student. And the way that we've adapted to the pandemic, all we want to do is just like set a good example. So yeah, that's my presentation. You go on to the next slide, I think. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Alia. That's really great. And I think that point of doing your best, that's all we can do. That's all we can ask, is that everyone just tries their best to have that positive impact. And I think you touched on a really great point about just because a society or a student group isn't sustainability related doesn't mean that they shouldn't have to think about how they can reduce their impact. And if any other students who are members of societies are on society committees, I'm sure you would welcome them in coming to speak to you and learning best practice about how to make these changes and how to make those considerations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we will have our final speaker, who is Lauren from the Department for Sustainability and Social Responsibility.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Rachel. I'm really pleased to be here this evening, and it's been super heartening to hear about all of the sustainability work that's been ongoing across the university. So many thanks for bringing the panel here today. My name's Lauren. I'm the Events and Student Engagement Coordinator with the Department for Social Responsibility. Next slide, please. Great. So as many as my peers have touched on during this event, A global pandemic may have changed the way that we work, but certainly has not stopped all that we've been doing. SRS has been progressing work towards becoming a zero carbon and zero waste university, widening participation and supporting inclusion, working together with local communities, and of course, engaging with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. So, next one. Awesome. So I'd like to start out by sharing some of the key accomplishments that SRS has made this academic year to celebrate the resilience and motivation that staff and students have demonstrated through the current situation. So the first of which is that 250 students are now members of the Sustainability Champions Network. So a warm hello to those of you that are already part of the network, and for those of you that aren't, it's not too late to sign up. I'll touch a little bit more on that in just a bit. But yeah, a great accomplishment and a really good network to be a part of. We've also been fortunate enough to support 10 student-led projects through the SRS Student Project Grant. This includes projects addressing issues around inclusion, equality, and diversity, developing a guide for young people about COP26, and upskilling students around reuse through online sessions. So a really valuable body of work there, and it is always wonderful to kind of enable students to carry out these extremely creative and important projects. And the last accomplishment I'd like to highlight just now is that we've been working to further embed the climate crisis and the SDGs in the academic curriculum and student experience, making information more accessible through the student journey. So really kind of just putting these key themes and topics into context, depending on your degree program or your course. So it's really nice to take a few moments just to reflect on all the great work that's been ongoing through the academic year. And of course, to continue this work, I'd like to share with you some opportunities for involvement on the next slide. Great. So the first thing that I'd like to point out is some light touch involvement via our online training. The first one would be our Be Sustainable Online. It's a short online course that introduces you to some of the ways that you can become more sustainable at the university and in your own life. It only takes about 30 minutes to complete, and it's a really good introduction to some key social responsibility and sustainability topics. So I really highly recommend this if you haven't done it. It's a good way to get familiar with kind of the broad scope of issues in this sector. If you're looking for something a little bit more in depth, I would recommend to you the Carbon Literacy Program. This training program is made up of 3 online sessions spread across 3 weeks. And the program promotes an awareness of the carbon dioxide costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community, and organizational basis. I really can't recommend this course enough. It's available for booking just now, and it's due to take place in March. So I'd say if you're interested, do go ahead and book your places soon, just because there's only a certain number of slots available. The next way that you can get involved is by attending our events, of course. Oh, you might, thanks. We've got 2 on this week, so I hope to see some of you there. The first one is on Wednesday. It's our Fair Trade Fortnight event, and this event will address the growing challenges that climate change brings to farmers and workers in the global South. I'd also like to say that as a part of this event, there's a chance to win a £25 and £50 voucher to the local One World shop, which is a great prize, and it's a great business. It's fair trade. So to enter the competition, all you have to do is submit a photo of yourself on social media engaging with fair trade using the hashtag #GreenIn19 as a nod to this campaign, and make sure to tag us as well. The next event this week is on Thursday. It is a part of our Build Back Better series. And this event will address how circular economy can help us build back better from COVID-19. So another really great event. You can find those on our website. And then finally, kind of just looping back to the Sustainability Champions Network, it's really easy to sign up if you haven't already. You can register on our website. And after signing up, you'll receive loads of resources and opportunities to increase your knowledge in the subject area and just build up some confidence to take action. So do register if you're interested in receiving those resources. Next slide, please. Thanks. So if you'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the opportunities that we've got, we're always looking for student contributors to help facilitate our Students Guide series events. And I've got a couple on the horizon that we're actively looking for. So if you're interested in developing your facilitation and communication skills is a great opportunity. The first series that we're looking for contributors for is the Climate Change Solutions Workshop, which we hope will enable a space for attendees to discuss blue sky solutions to the climate crisis. And we're also looking for contributors for the Sustainable Skillshare event, which we'd like to showcase sustainable tips and tricks that students can learn more about while engaging with their creative side. If an academic opportunity is more for you, I would point you towards the Living Labs. You do have an opportunity to do a Living Lab for your dissertation. And by undertaking a Living Lab project, you'll be able to work towards the Sustainable Development Goals on a real world related issue and gain transferable skills, which of course look good on your CV. So do kind of consider that as you're narrowing down what your dissertation will be on. And then finally, I think this is relevant to a lot of people on the call today, people on the panel and people in the audience. Get recognized for all of the great work that you're doing just now. We have our Changemakers Award nominations live. It's a part of our annual Sustainability Awards ceremony. And this Changemakers Award recognizes current students and staff who have made a noticeable positive impact by either undertaking a successful socially responsible or sustainable project, or inspiring others to act in a more socially responsible or sustainable way. So please do put yourself and or your peers forward for this before the deadline, which is Friday, the 12th of March. And finally, for all of the writers on the call, I'd urge you to consider writing a blog piece for us. Our blog is for discussing, debating, understanding, and promoting social responsibility and sustainability issues of both local and global significance to the university and community. So please do get in touch if you'd like to put a piece forward for publishing. Last slide, please. So that is just kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of the opportunities that we've got on right now. You know, our whole department is always very happy to work alongside students. So if you've got any questions, you know, do drop me a line, and yeah, I'll be happy to chat through that with you. I'll hand back over to you, Rachel.
I think I'm actually handing over to Amanda straight away, so thank you, Lauren.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you so much, Lauren. If you haven't been involved in the SRS department's work, department's networks, training, activities, and events, I very much highly recommend doing so. And also attend the Fair Trade Fortnight happening this week. I'll be there, so very excited. And yeah, as a sabbatical officer, the SRS department is so great to work with. And yeah, they are a great friend to the association. So thank you so much, Lauren, for that. And thank you to all our speakers on some incredible presentations that addressed a really great range of topics and issues and activities. Really insightful, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. Also quickly, before we get into our Q&A, just want to give a quick shout out to Shrub, who are a local cooperative and organization in Edinburgh who are dedicated to working to have a world without waste. Shrub unfortunately could not be here due to a last minute emergency, but they are an incredible organization that I definitely suggest checking out. They hold weekly events on crafting and chatting and meditation for their community, which are available to anyone. And they're a great example of an Edinburgh community initiative doing some great work addressing sustainability during COVID. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to them, and very sad that unfortunately they couldn't be here. But yes, I think now we'll be moving on to the Q&A. Don't know if there's next slide. Perfect. Great. So if anyone has any questions for any of our speakers, please do feel free to put them in the chat or use the raise hand function, and I can call on you and you can speak. Oh, perfect. We have our first question for Pete Higgins. It is, do you think universities should be more proactive on fossil fuel divestments? So I'll pass on to you, Pete, if that's all right.
Yeah, it is okay. And thank you for the question, Joy. The answer is quite straightforward. All universities should divest entirely from fossil fuels as soon as they possibly can. And the University of Edinburgh has actually been working very hard on this. And one issue is the divestment, to make sure that we're trying to avoid using fossil fuels. The other is to accept that we are having, we do produce emissions one way or another. and ways of addressing that issue through sequestering carbon, etc., is the other side to the divestment. And again, the university's been working on plans in that regard. I could talk to you more about that if you wish. But these things are live issues. There's an organization called the Environmental Association of Universities and Colleges, which has been campaigning for this to be a feature of all universities and colleges in the UK. But I think there'll be an announcement from the University of Edinburgh very soon on its work in that regard. Thanks for this.
Yeah, thanks. No, great answer. And yeah, divestment definitely still a really big issue, and also a big issue within the student community. Recently gave a talk on it as well, and just our history of student activism around divestment as well. So if it is something you're interested in, definitely within a great university community to talk about it and do some action in that regard. So thank you for that answer, Pete. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat as well. I think I have a bit of a question I'll ask our panelists as well. I think, Ellie, you did kind of touch on this a little bit, but I think it's just a time kind of for all of us where life gets really overwhelming, and especially when we talk about sustainability and climate change, it's one of those things where it's this huge, complex global issue, but also there are like small things we can do. But I guess for any panelist, how do you kind of deal with not getting too overwhelmed, dealing with eco-anxiety, and still kind of maintaining that hope that we can have that change when things particularly can get really tough, and especially during a global pandemic where they seem tougher than ever in a lot of instances. So yeah, if any panelists want to take on that question, feel free to raise your hand or just speak. Oh, perfect. Katrine, I'll call you first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I can see that, you know, there being this huge pressure on all of us to do something and enact some kind of change in the middle of all of this can feel like a really big thing. But I saw one of my friends actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I think her advice was really good on it, which was essentially just focus on the small things right now. If that's all you're able to do, like even if it's just, you know, making sure that that the recycling is all correct and that it all goes in the appropriate bins. If that's all that you have the ability to do right now, then for your participation in the movement, that's good enough right now. I think her point about that was, it was very sort of focused on maintaining a good mental health while trying to take part in something that matters to somebody.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Oh no, I'm so bad with keeping track of the hand raised. Let me find who. Ellie, perfect. If you want to come in next, and then Isla as well.
Yeah, so I think just going back to what Katrine just said there about kind of mental health and stuff, I think that's got, especially during the pandemic, has got a massive, massive part to play. And I think that especially, I mean, I know a lot of people have been feeling very isolated. And I think, especially when you think of eco-anxiety, it makes you feel as if you're the only one that's worried about these issues as well. So I'd say one really important thing is just to kind of reach out to other people and like make sure that they are also aware of what's going on, and just doing things on social media, be that sharing posts or getting involved with different groups of people that share the kind of same eco-anxiety, because I think it is very easy for everyone to feel like they're the only people that are worried about these things. And especially just now when we're not seeing people in person, you're thinking, oh my gosh, why is nothing happening? Why is no one worried about this? But I think it's so important to, yeah, just like reach out to other people and be honest and open about it. If you want to have a little cry, it's absolutely okay. You know, it's, yeah, I feel like it's all about kind of being open about it and just reaching out to people and making sure that you don't feel like you're the only one. So yeah, that's what I'd kind of say. And also getting outside, so important. I can't stress enough. I think Pete had said this, but I've also done some research on the effects of being in outdoor green spaces on your mental health. It's really, really good. So I think even just going outside for half an hour, especially on a day like today when it's been so sunny, just doing that can definitely try and boost morale a little bit just now. So yeah.
I just wanted to contribute in a small way to remind ourselves that just because we're spending so much time at home, I found that the most effective way to combat eco-anxiety and feeling overwhelmed by the state of the world is to unplug, and that social media has become a really big part of our lives, but it's also in a lot of ways a very unnecessary, stress to be added. So to be connected with people is a blessing, but it can also be a source of a lot of stress and feelings of being overwhelmed. So if you feel like you need to, delete Instagram or delete Facebook or delete Messenger, I'd really recommend that as a practice. Yeah.
Yeah, some really great answers. Yeah, I definitely think being in nature and kind of unplugging is definitely some practices I take on as well. Yeah, unplugging and just going for a walk in Edinburgh is a great thing to do. Yeah, and a great comment as well from Pete in the chat that if we each do a number of small things, the impact of all of us will be significant. And yeah, that is definitely something that once you think of it really helps keep you going and really helps you feel like you do have an impact and are part of like a great community who are also doing incredible things, kind of like the community we have here now, because we're all here. So I also have a question for Katrine, which is, do you think the Arctic climate impacts your point of view of eco-poetry? So I'll pass on to you to answer that one.
Great, thank you. I mean, yeah, it definitely does. For some context, I'm originally from the north of Norway, where I grew up, and I moved to the UK about 6 years ago. So yeah, the Arctic climate that I grew up with definitely impacts my not only view on eco-poetry, but my eco-poetic expressions. Like the poem that I read, Melting, was, it's partly inspired by a visit I made to a glacier with my family years ago when I was little, in addition to being the response to Professor Ferrier's text. And it's also a sort of draws on other critical material that I've read. There was recently an edited collection specifically on the perceived safety of the global north with regards to environmental issues, in which one of the texts very specifically focused on this image cultivated through the I think it's called the International Seed Bank or Seed Vault, that one, on Svalbard, as well as there's a library that's been set up where they're trying to accumulate languages in different books over, I think it's 100-year period. And the fact that these things are on Norwegian ground or Norwegian territory really makes the global north seem like a very sort of environmentally safe area, when in fact last year or the year before there was a news report on how, for example, we are able to cultivate and grow grapes to produce wine now, and that doesn't really go hand in hand with the image of the global north as this cold Arctic area. So yeah, I definitely think that my history affects how I go about eco-poetry. Thank you.
Thank you. And no, really, really great answer and really interesting. Yeah, no, I definitely think, yeah, it's just easy to get inspired by the climates that surround you and what you see. And yeah, your poetry is really beautiful. So it shows that you're just inspired by the beauty of nature as well. It's great. No worries. And then we have another question as well in the chat about divestment. which is many universities in Africa have not divested either due to lack of information or just being financially incapable. Do you think universities in the developed economies can do more to encourage the divestment progress? I may put you on the spot there, Pete, as well, if you're okay to answer that, as I think you might know a bit about this, but also if any other panelists as well know about divestment too, feel free to raise your hand.
I'm happy to talk about this. The trouble is I'm happy to talk, full stop. So that's why I'm trying not to. And especially when you get such interesting answers from other people. This is pretty clear that if you just think about the big issues that are going on at the moment with regard to equity globally, leave alone our history. We all universities in the wealthy global north should be doing their best to support other universities in other areas. And so it is quite plain that universities as leaders, if you like, in terms of thinking and questioning and innovating, we should all be doing this. So what could the University of Edinburgh do? Well, the first thing it could do is get its own house in order, and it has been striving to do that. But it's been slow about doing it. So this is one thing I would encourage you all to do, which is to go back to the time of the lobbying led by USA and others within societies within USA, and actually make your voices heard. There are university executive meetings coming up in the next 4 months where big decisions will be made on things that the university could do in order to not just divest, but actually to become carbon neutral. I will be making my voice heard, but your voice will be louder. If you care about this stuff, work together and make a noise, okay? Now, it's one thing a university like ours trying to become carbon neutral, but remember, we've been exploiting the planet for 400 years. So whatever we do, it is trivial if we become carbon neutral by 2040. It doesn't even begin to come close to the impact that we've had over that 400-year time period. And certainly the last period since the Industrial Revolution, the last 150 years. So we should be doing more within the university. We should be embarrassed to think that we're only aiming to be carbon neutral. With regard to Africa and other countries, then the question is, what can we do? Well, the export of technology and ideas is one important thing. Funds are unlikely to flow in that direction, but making sure that we make the case vigorously that UK government should support countries in the global south one way and another. All of these sorts of things are things that we can argue for that would be generally supported. Wherever we can do things that are free, that develop opportunities for sharing of ideas, we should be doing that too. Anyway, I've probably said too much, but these are some things that might be useful. Oh, just one other thing. The university is going through a curriculum review at the moment led by Vice Principal Colm Harmon, who is very receptive to the idea that we make sustainability competencies core to the student learning competencies, the graduate competencies of the university. I've been working with them on that, as have others. And again, your voices would be influential at a very strategic time just now. And that would help with students from all over the world who are here in this university. Thank you.
Yeah, really great answer. And definitely something key, especially, how important we can be as a student body is really just realizing how critical our voice is as students, just pushing for universities change and helping them reach the commitments they do have to being zero carbon, but also so much more. So yeah, definitely using your voice is incredibly important. And we are about 5 minutes from when we were supposed to wrap up. So I think we've kind of done incredibly well with timing. Yes, definitely. You have a lovely comment in the chat, which I will reiterate, which is, a thank you to all the incredible students and participants in this important event. It has been really great to hear from you all. and to have you engaged in this event. And a huge thank you again to our presenters and speakers. You all did so well. And thank you to everyone who attended. And just so you know as well, we have been recording this event. So if you want to go back and catch what some of our speakers said or have information on the slides, we will be posting this in the Green Hub Teams channel that we run at the Students Association. Slight plug for a great network that we have. It basically is on Microsoft Teams called Green Hub. I can try to find a link and put it in the chat as well. But yes, we'll have that up on there so you can come back and hear more from our speakers. But yeah, thank you so much again, everyone, for attending, and I will let you off wherever you are. It's 7:30 in Edinburgh here, so definitely going to be eating after this. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Really, really enjoyed it. Oh, yes, also too, bad of me for to forget, but this whole week we're having our Green During COVID-19 campaign launching. So every day until Friday, we'll be having a different topic that we'll be sharing resources for and having some great students and societies contributing to sharing their tips, some which have been here at the event today. Ross from Food Security and Sustainability Society had a great video, as today we are focusing on food. So yeah, definitely check that out and keep an eye on all of our social media channels throughout this week. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Pass along to Rachel too, in case you have anything else I may have missed.
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I think just to thank everyone, speakers and attendees, for coming along and contributing. It's certainly made me feel a lot better about the state of the world and the situation we all find ourselves in. So I hope it's given you all a bit of solace and a bit of hope and lots of work to do next.
Perfect, great. Yes, I'll be sticking around till at least 7:30. So if anyone has any other questions or anything they want to ask Rachel and I, feel free to put them in the chat as well, as we'll be around for a bit. But yeah, thank you so much again. And yeah, as Rachel said, really great and inspiring event, and just goes to show how many people are passionate about sustainability and how much more we can do.